Welcome back, everybody, and as always, we wanted to do our kind of follow-up video on more of a kind of secondary, overarching topic from the latest chapter, chapter 1109, 1109, as Abe would want me to say.
Nailed it.
But it seems like we are going to get to know the Gorosei pretty well, pretty soon, if that is in fact who is arriving at the end of the chapter.
Yeah, and, we thought it was crazy just to be seeing Saturn, and now it really does seem that it's inevitable that all of them are pulling up at once at the same time, and we're going to see them all in their true forms.
And so with that in mind, and just how quickly that's approaching, we wanted to go through a little bit of not really what we've seen from these characters so far, because we haven't seen a whole lot of each of them individually aside from Saturn, but we thought it would be interesting to go through some of those real-life inspirations Oda has used in creating these characters, and also examining what particular title they hold, so what role they may hold in the future of the story.
Yeah, and so we decided to go in the order of planets that they're named after. So first we've got Topman Warcury, obviously after Mercury, and his appearance appears to be primarily based on Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the last Russian leader of the Soviet Union, who famously brought down the Berlin Wall and was always known for his very anti-war morals. And he's even got the similar bald head and birthmark that we see on Warcury.
The birthmark is almost like a dead giveaway that is who inspired this one, so it made it a pretty easy choice for us as well. But like you said, yeah, he is renowned for having broken down a literal barrier of division that sat between families and a country for decades, so it's kind of interesting to consider the actual role he holds in the story. But we'll take it a little bit further, because his namesake, Warcury, features the written character of Wo, which likely comes from Wota, the Japanese pronunciation of water. And this also may be a reference to the Japanese name for Mercury, which translates to water star.
Yeah, and so then we also wanted to look at what his hidden form may actually look like. And from what we can tell in the panel when they're all at Morijoa attacking Sabo, is he appears to be a boar-like figure, which would be consistent with the association of the pig in the Chinese zodiac to the water element, which is where we can tie it in with the translation of water star.
Yeah, it's very kind of on the nose, having the water star be his namesake, and the Chinese 5 elements also being consistent with the 5 Gorosei that we see, so having him be representative of one of the Chinese zodiac signs would be very consistent with that idea. But we'll take it a step further as well. As he is the warrior god of justice, it's likely he's had a few connections to some other characters and events we've seen throughout the story so far.
Yeah, so the primary one being he is most likely the one who oversees Aeneas Lobby, as they quite literally feature the gates of justice.
I mean, they also have Baskerville, they have all the judges, like, it is a whole system set up there. Not one that's a very favorable justice system by any means, but one that would definitely fall under his responsibilities. And one person that has been sent to Enies Lobby in the past would actually be Tom. And it would be kind of interesting to consider, looking back, that it was likely Warcury himself that put out that kind of decree to have Tom brought in for building the ship for the King of the Pirates. And I'm sure that would create some bad blood between Frankie and Warcury themselves should they meet in the future, which seems very, very inevitable as they're pretty much on the same island.
Yeah, and that would just be interesting to see how Frankie would actually interact with the Gorosei, because so far it seems like it'd just be the big three of Luffy, Sanji, Zoro, but now it really does seem like everyone's going to have to come face to face with these guys. And the thought of Frankie having such a direct connection to one in particular could really play out in an interesting way.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that it's going to take an entire crew to likely take these guys on, so any connection they have is going to likely play some part into who's going to end up facing off with them in the end. But with that said, let's take a look at our next inline of the planets, being Ethanbaron Nusjuro. And his is also a fairly obvious kind of appearance, being Mahatma Gandhi. It's not only just the attire, but his look. He's like the only one with a different pigment, honestly, from the other Gorosei, besides maybe Jupiter.
Yeah, I mean, he's still lighter, but definitely everything else exact match. This is 100% Gandhi.
And Gandhi, being the leader of a number of political and spiritual movements all throughout India, to really be kind of the spearhead of the Indian independence movement, trying to gain their autonomy as a nation.
Right, and that also came with his focus on peaceful protest and nonviolent rebellion in order to become free from what was British rule. Really is so different than what the Gorosei kind of now stand for.
Not only that, I mean, peace has not really been their go-to option, granted in a lot of situations.
No, definitely not. Especially now.
But also not only trying to break those chains, but imposing them on more nations. Just very ironic. And as for his namesake, in classical East Asian astrology, the planet Venus is actually considered to be the gold planet, representing metal among the Chinese 5 elements. So again, playing into that Chinese 5 elements Gorosei parallel. Whereas gold is often associated with finance, it very much makes sense for the role he plays.
And that also kind of ties into what I find extremely interesting about him, is of all the characters throughout the series, he is the first middle initial that we've seen that isn't a D.
It may mean that he's actually just one of the main people that was involved in standing against the D themselves. Perhaps they distinguished themselves by kind of adding their own moniker with their own initial that was very different from the D, but his humanoid form is also very distinct, so perhaps he is very special in the fact that he still very much looks like a humanoid figure.
Yeah, that shadow did look like a person, which also could pair with the fact that the rest of the 5 all seem to have guns on them, pistols, whereas he is the only one who has a katana. And as you were mentioning to me earlier, it's kind of been speculated that this could be a very special ancient blade.
It could be one of the Kitetsu set, which would make a lot of sense and set him up for an obvious kind of clash with Zoro. But that katana also could play into that hidden form, being more humanoid himself. If he were to retain his arms and his fingers, everything that allows him that kind of dexterity, it would make sense if he would be able to use his blade in that state, which would make it a very interesting matchup for any of our Straw Hats, especially Zoro.
Mr. 1 times 100, he's all sword.
Exactly. But, as we mentioned previously, being the warrior god of finance, it is very likely that the biggest contribution Nusjuro oversees is the heavenly tribute that is required of all nations that are a part of the umbrella of the protection of the world government, and one that is very renowned for just being ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's affected a ton of different characters across the story. It was what led to Kaido being sold off, other nations being completely put into poverty. Great Terminal and almost Sorbet, if it weren't for Kuma, were completely eliminated just to benefit the wealthier parts of the country.
And even some characters in the story, like those people who have decided to live in Totland, they're making the active choice to say, oh yeah, I'll pay the tax of my literal soul rather than have to pay this tax, because it's just that egregious. If that tells you what kind of imposing policies he's putting out on the world, it seems very likely that he is going to be facing a lot of the blame for the suffering that stemmed from that.
And that'll move us into our third elder, Marcus Mars, who at first we really didn't have too much that we could think of, but the more we started to dig in, we really started to find a lot of interesting possibilities that could be hidden beneath his character.
And so to start us on Mr. Mars here, let's take a look at his appearance, which seems very heavily inspired by Itagaki Taisuke, a Japanese politician who was known for founding the freedom and people's rights movement and Japan's first political party, the Liberal Party, in the late 19th century. His namesake also could draw from the Roman god of war Mars himself, where both the name Marcus and Mars are very clearly derived from the same concept, which would be a pretty spot-on parallel with their official titles in the story being the warrior gods, being that Mars is the literal ruler over the concept of war.
Yeah, and the more we dug into it, we also realized that along with war, Mars is also considered an agricultural guardian, which, while agriculture is technically the official title of Jupiter, it still does generate some impact on the environment itself and could still definitely be tied together.
And in regards to his hidden form, he has a very particular form as compared to some of the others that were more undistinct. It is very clear that he transforms into a bird-like shadow. So it's more a question about what kind of bird could it be. In some regards, it does look similar to like an albatross form that we see Morgan's in all the time, that he's appeared throughout the story because he's actually kind of smartly hiding his identity, always being in that zone form. But we did come across a bird that seems like it fits a little bit better.
Yeah, we think the most likely bird that we came across in kind of the symbolism and mythology would be a crane. It's very similar in shape to the shadow figure that we've seen, and across a lot of different cultures, the crane is kind of symbolic of devout loyalty and dedication to a single life partner.
And that would also be very consistent with what we see from Mars's mannerisms and actions throughout the story, as there have been certain times where some of the other Gorosei will question or even outright kind of object the orders or decisions of Imu, but Mars has never been one of those characters of the Gorosei. He is very consistently shown to never really have any question for the higher power which he follows.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, he even once referred to the Nefertari family as traitors for the choice not to come live in Nusjuro, which really shows just how deeply and intense his devotion to be directly connected and close to Imu truly is.
And in regard to his role as the warrior god of environment, it's kind of worth speculating that there's one particular Straw Hat whose dream is going to tie into this, and the one that comes to mind for me was definitely Sanji and his pursuit of the All Blue, because having a place where all of the seas naturally convene together into one location be something that was so renowned that it is still, in a way, just like a lot of things in the One Piece world, a dream that exists, tells me that something that he might have done way in the past is probably the reason the All Blue doesn't exist today.
And along that same vein, he also probably has further knowledge regarding a lot of the other irregular parts of nature and certain environments that we've seen just in different places throughout the One Piece world. You've got the never-ending light at Aeneas Lobby, all the thunderstorms, never-ending lightning on Raijin Island, and then even Punk Hazard with the half tundra, half volcanic wasteland just right down the middle.
And a lot of those could easily be attributed, some people think, to having awakenings of devil fruits on those islands, impacting the environment and everything around it. But the mere fact that they are altering the environment forever kind of makes it feel like it would fall into his domain, so maybe we'll learn more about devil fruits and all that from him. And connecting agriculture and environment once more, let's take a look at our next planetary elder, being Shepherd Jupiter, who he doesn't have the most apparent appearance similarity from any real-life figure we found, but there are a few figures and discussion boards where people do think that he seems to look like the 16th president of the United States, being Mr. Abraham Lincoln.
I mean, he's got the beard, he's very tall, kind of the same build, and this would kind of just follow along the same theme that we've seen for all of the elders' real-life inspiration, where they're sort of a renowned liberator, because Lincoln, in America, emancipated the slaves and abolished slavery.
Although Nusjuro probably has the highest concentration of slaves in the One Piece world, not only because of the other celestial dragons, but just for their walkways, just for fun. So it's definitely a continuing along those ironic themes as well, but he also has a very interesting namesake as well, being St. Peter, very likely the shepherd portion of Jupiter's name could very easily be a reference to that religious figure of St. Peter being the first pope of the Christian church and what is often considered one of the most devout followers of Christ himself. And that would also kind of be consistent with the sort of world leader renowned for, again, an overall positive impact, somewhat falling in line with an evil side of the story instead in the One Piece series. It's also worth looking at the etymology of his name as well. Jupiter is represented by the kanji for 10 in the first portion of his name, which also just so happens to kind of look like the Christian cross, once again, as you can see referenced in the trivia portion of the One Piece wiki page for him.
Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning, he, as we were just talking about people never questioning Imu, he's the one who has most outright questioned Imu in the past, which could maybe in the future allude to how Peter denied and questioned his loyalty to Jesus 3 separate times.
That was one parallel that we were making that felt like a long shot, but it is very interesting to remember that that is a very distinct story within the Bible about that connection, and if he's already demonstrated some kind of wavering loyalty, perhaps he might be a figure that continues to be the focus of that in the future. Continuing on to his hidden form, something that is a bit less clear as it's a lot more blob-like.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to make out an exact animal shape or any real shape. We looked into the Chinese zodiac sign, which is wood, and one of the animals associated with wood is the tiger, so we're thinking maybe that's why it has such a big mouth.
Yeah, as you said, Jupiter in the Japanese language is often referred to as the wood planet, and wood representing it from one of the Chinese 5 elements again. A lot of plants and wildlife and agriculture itself, obviously. So, like with the other Gorosei and the division which they oversee, it would make sense that one of the tragedies of agriculture we see in the One Piece world would likely be a result of the choices made by Jupiter.
Right, this could be what led to the complete loss of greenery along the Red Line compared to when it was under the control of the Lunarians, and why it's now dividing the world up how it is currently.
Yeah, seeing the Red Line fall could be one of the biggest events I imagine is probably coming in the story, because it would make more sense for everything for that to just not exist anymore. But that does finally lead us into our final planet of the group, being the one we probably know the most about, being St. Jaygarcia Saturn.
Bomb!
He has been humbled a lot ever since he's appeared, and it seems like he's called the backup for the others because he couldn't handle himself. But just like the others, let's take a look at where he got his looks from, and this one actually does seem like it's pretty more agreed on than others, as it seems like the Italian figure Giuseppe Garibaldi, who is an Italian general and patriot who is kind of a father of modern Italy, who contributed to Italian unification and the creation of the Kingdom of Italy in the late 19th century. And a very different person from his namesake, actually.
Yeah, we really couldn't find anything on this one. The only suggestion that we were coming across was the lead guitarist and vocalist of the Grateful Dead, Jaygarcia, which seems like a bit of a stretch, but I don't know, maybe that's Oda's guilty pleasure. Maybe
like Freddie Mercury for all of them too. You could have other ones, but
that would be a hilarious twist. It's just Oda's playlist.
Maybe, but he also has shown us his hidden form in a not so hidden manner anymore, as we've seen the spider with the bull horns, and now we've seen it in pizza form.
Pancake form all over.
He's given us a lot more to see, but it definitely does seem like this is based on the depictions in a lot of folklore of the Ushi Oni, or a yokai, which has the head of an ox and the body of a 6-legged spider, which is very consistent with the combination we've seen so far.
And according to the same folklore, the Ushi Oni is known for both causing incurable illnesses, similar to the way that Saturn is responsible for infecting both Ginny and Bonnie with the Sapphire Scales disease, and then also for producing poisons, like the full beast form that we've seen from Saturn's second transformation, where his legs were producing poison so strong that it could melt objects.
So, From what we can see, his is definitely the easiest to tell about, but we've also seen a lot more of what his direct involvement in the story has been as the warrior god of science and defense. Obviously, there's a reason he was the one sent to Egghead, and it's because he has had a lot of direct involvement with what their genius scientist Vegapunk has been working on for the world government, from the Pacifista project to the Seraphim lately, even the Mother Frame and their energy source they use for that, and of course, poor Kuma.
Oh man, can never pour one out for the man. Can never say enough how tragic his story is. And along with his story, there's also the human experimentation that we have with Jenny and Bonnie and their jewelry disease.
It's even likely that he was the one with the most involvement with the Mother Frame, which seems to be Emo's new favorite play toy, so it's really important to them. But it also seems like it's some sort of recreation of maybe the Sky Island of Uranus, which is obviously crucial to the kind of grip of balance of power that exists in the world if ancient weapons were to get out again.
Yeah, and to wrap up his character, I just want to say we are all hoping for his downfall. Really hoping that this is the beginning of the end for him. And like you said at the start of this, he had to call in all of the other guys because he dropped the ball so hard. And they told him that we need to get there now. This needs to be handled. So really hoping that if he's not defeated, he's cut out from the circle.
I don't think he's going to be invited out for anything else with the rest of the hangouts. Like, there's no more sleepover at Emu's.
Someone's got to take the fall.
If they can't get anything to stop the message from going out, it is definitely going to fall on his shoulders. But we did want to kind of summarize everything we've discussed so far by revisiting what seems to be a very consistent theme for a lot of the inspiration of these 5 particular characters. And as we mentioned before, these were people that had an overall positive, liberating, peaceful impact on the world at large. And they were people that, in a way, made the world a better place. Warcury and Gorbachev reuniting Berlin after decades of division.
Yeah, Nusjuro with Gandhi dedicated his whole life to peaceful protests and fighting for independence and liberation of entire nations.
Mars with Taisuke founding the political party that centered around freedom of the people themselves.
Jupiter, you have Saint Peter, the shepherd of the followers of Jesus Christ and leader of a foundation established on ethics and helping your neighbor.
And Saturn being Garibaldi, who unified Italy from warring as it had been from centuries of division, and is considered a father of Italy for unifying people rather than dividing more. These are people that sound like almost the kind of impact Luffy would have on the story. So, in some sort of way, maybe these are all characters that are supposed to be like liberating forces, like Nika, like Luffy, like Joy Boy. And instead, for some reason, they fell to their knees to such an evil force.
Right, they've gone astray, they've lost their way.
And maybe we'll find out more as to why that is, but if we really get to face off with them soon, I'm hoping we get to learn more about the people that they are. But we're gonna have to wait for that next chapter, more to learn about their backstories, and until then, you guys let us know what role you think the Gorosei are gonna be playing in the endgame of the story. Make sure to like if you enjoyed the video, keep commenting with any ideas you guys have in any future videos, and as always, be crew.